Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Monty if you're new here, and in today's video I'm going to be doing my second reading wrap up of the year. My first reading wrap up I did a couple of months ago, and since then I have read 7 books, which averages out to 3 books a month, give or take. And while that's less than I've read in the last couple of years, it's still more than I've read at any other point in my life. So I'm pleased with it. I do think that I'm going to pick up the pace in the later half of the year just due to my circumstances. But for now, 3 books a month is very solid. The first 2 books I have to talk about are both featured in my most recent reading vlog where I read from my 2025 TBR. So I'm going to be really brief with these. If you want my more in-depth thoughts, I would go check that video out. To start, I have Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. This is the first non-narrative, non-fiction book that I've read this year. I have read a couple of memoirs, but this was my first informational, fact-based nonfiction read of the year. I went into this very cocky, thinking that it wouldn't have any new information to offer me, but I'm so happy that I was proven wrong. I learned a lot about the benefits of sleep, the roles of the different stages of sleep, the consequences of neglecting sleep. It explains why some people are biologically wired to wake up either earlier or later than others, why we experience jet lag, things of that nature. It is very, very thorough in its exploration of the topic. Matthew Walker does have his PhD, and I believe that his research focuses entirely on the impacts of sleep on human health and disease. I didn't fact check any of the information in this book, but a lot of it does make intuitive sense. I think that this is a great beginner-friendly nonfiction read. It's accessible and interesting and engaging, and there is a 100% chance that you will walk away from it wanting to prioritize how much shut-eye you get each night. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I have 11/22/63, the longest book that I have read in a while, running at 849 pages. If you haven't heard of 11/22/63, this is a historical fiction with a time traveling component. It follows a man who goes back in time to the 1950s with the sole purpose of preventing the JFK assassination. Despite having a very intriguing plot setup, this is much more of a character-driven story. The core of this story lies in our main character Jake's personal journey, his relationships, and the ripple effect that his choices have on him and others. There is a romance involved, which wasn't necessarily my favorite, but I do see how it was essential to the overarching themes. There's also some serious found family vibes, and I absolutely loved those scenes. The plot itself really picks up in the second half of the book, and this has to have one of the most beautiful endings that I've ever read. I was so wholly satisfied with the way that King wrapped things up. I wasn't enamored with this story the way that so many other people are, but I did have a really great time. I was never bored, and I would recommend this to people who enjoy medium-paced character studies. Another 4 out of 5 stars for me. Now I have 3 new releases to talk about that I, along with the rest of the world, was so excited to get to. Starting with Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. To date, Abby Jimenez is probably my favorite romance author that I've read from. And what I mean when I say that is I love the romance that she creates. The couples in the Part of Your World series are everything to me. I love their storylines, their chemistry, their banter, their love. I love those pairings. So I had really high expectations for Say You'll Remember Me, and sadly, I was let down. Quick premise, okay? 2 people, they meet, and they go on a life-changing first date. Never felt this way before, instant connection type of energy. The caveat one of them is moving across the country the following morning, and the two of them will likely never live in the same place again. So now they're in this predicament where they're like, well, we've only hung out once, so it seems a little bit hasty to enter a long distance relationship that might never turn into a short distance one, but it's really hard to imagine that we'll ever feel this way so instantly with anyone ever again. That is the plot setup. And then also in classic AJ fashion, each of them is going through their own personal traumas along the way. I was very interested in this premise because I've never seen a long distance relationship featured in a romance before, so I was really excited. My relationship actually started out pretty similarly. I hung out with this guy for the first time and we hit it off, but we also lived in two different states. And we too were like, well, we can try and we can fail, or we cannot try and just never know. So we tried, and 5 years later, we're living together and we're planning to get married. Anyway, I was happy to see a long distance relationship explored. Sadly, though, this was the first Abby Jimenez book that I've read where I actually enjoyed the side conversations that were happening and the subplots more than I enjoyed the central romance. In particular, I really enjoyed reading about our female main character's personal life. Her mom is diagnosed with early onset dementia, so we get to see how her family comes together to take care of mom. And it didn't focus on just the tender, sweet moments in the family. It also really emphasized the struggles that they faced. And I thought that it framed the caretaking responsibilities for someone with a neurodegenerative disease in a really realistic way. What hard decisions does the family have to make together? And how do they approach those really sensitive conversations? It was really sad, and I know that that's been a critique for a lot of people with this book, but I actually thought that that part was done really well. The romance, though, the romance was not it for me. It was insta-lovey, but that didn't bother me so much as I didn't understand why they were into each other. I wasn't convinced that they were a good match and that their relationship was worth all of the long distance turmoil. At the very least, in my romance novels, I need to be rooting for the two people to be together, and I just wasn't. And then when we get to the resolution at the end, it felt very convenient, and it also felt really one-sided. Not my favorite Abby Jimenez, but it wasn't all bad, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. When this first came out, I was seeing mostly negative responses, but in the last couple of weeks, I have seen almost exclusively glowing reviews, with a lot of people dubbing this their #1 favorite Emily Henry book. So divisive, and me, I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I don't see it. I do not see it at all. That doesn't mean that it's not there, but I looked for it and I couldn't find it. I didn't see it. There was honestly nothing that I liked about this. And you might ask, well, why did you give it a 2-star rating instead of a 1-star rating? A 1-star for me is a DNF. I can't finish a book if it's truly a 1-star book. Great Big Beautiful Life, this gets an additional star because it's Emily Henry, and because her writing is objectively good, and because she tried something new, and I applaud her for that. I just wish that when she decided to try something new, it didn't so closely resemble the GOAT, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because it pales in comparison. And I know I shouldn't compare the two to one another, but it's impossible not to if you've read both of them. So this follows 2 writers, Alice and Hayden, who are competing for the rights to the life story of Margaret Ives, a reclusive heiress with a notorious family history. Margaret, many, many years ago, disappeared from the limelight due to a series of scandals that left everyone and the media just completely obsessed with her mysterious vanishing. Now, in her 80s, living quietly in a small town in Georgia, she's decided to break her silence. So she invites these two writers, Alice and Hayden, to her town for a month-long trial where they'll both interview her. And then at the end of the month, she's gonna pick whichever writer has the best story pitch, the one that resonates with her the most, to write her memoir. First off, over half of the book is dedicated to Margaret's backstory. And I mean way, way back. I'm talking great-grandfather level back. I kept thinking to myself, why? Why does this matter? I needed a literal family tree to keep track of who was who, and even then, I just didn't care. It felt tedious and dragged out with absolutely no emotional payoff. And then there was the romance, and the best way I can describe it is abrupt. Alice is your typical sunshine character. Hayden is your grumpy man. And out of nowhere, he warms up to her and they're in love. There was no organic progression of that relationship. It was like a switch flipped and boom, romance. I needed more tension, more development, something to earn that relationship. And even the conclusion to the story felt so rushed. It felt abrupt. So yeah, neither storyline really pulled me in. I didn't feel invested at all. And this was just a miss for me. I'll still read anything Emily Henry puts out because she did write my favorite romance of all time, Happy Place. But yeah, the third and final new release that I read is My Friends by Fredrik Backman. I, like many other people in the bookish space, am a devoted reader of Fredrik Backman. I've read 4 other books of his at this point. I was particularly drawn to this one because of the title. I was hoping that it would explore one of my favorite themes, found friendship, and I was right. Very simply put, My Friends is about 4 teenage outcasts who spend a transformative summer together. Many, many years later, one of those 4 friends is now in his 40s, I think, and he's recounting the story of that beautiful summer together to this 18-year-old girl who would have fit in with their friend group had she been around at the time. That's all I'm gonna say about the plot. I think it's best experienced with fresh eyes. This book has the same minimalistic, resonant writing style that Fredrik Backman is so highly revered for. It's easy to read, it's moving, and it's full of those poignant one-liners that make you pause and reflect on the human condition. There were some really, really touching scenes between the friends where you get to see the way that they love and support and accept one another, and that is just my favorite thing to read about, period. However, even though this book had all the ingredients that I typically love, it wasn't my favorite of Backman's works. I gave it 3.5 stars, so still above average. What I usually love about Fredrik Backman's books is that we're following ordinary people who are dealing with life struggles that somehow we can all relate to, even if we haven't experienced them in the exact same way. In My Friends, every single character is dealing with a significant trauma, like really, really heavy stuff. It reminded me a little bit of A Little Life, except for My Friends has some more comedic relief to balance things out. Still, the overwhelming amount of heaviness made it really hard for me to genuinely connect with any of the characters. Also, while I usually love Backman's reflective one-liners, in this one, they felt a tad overdone, and occasionally they veered into cheesy territory. What it felt like to me is that Fredrik Backman knows at this point what's gonna get an emotional reaction out of his audience. So he just put as much of that as possible into this book, and because of that, a lot of the sentiments lost their impact. It just got a little bit too extreme. Overall, I still enjoyed it. I would recommend it. I think I'm the outlier here in not being completely over the moon about it, but I do 100% see why people are so obsessed with this. If you've enjoyed Backman in the past, or if you generally like stories about misfits, then it's definitely worth picking up. Now for a little bit of literary fiction, I read Rejection by tulathimutte. Oh my. So this is a collection of 6 loosely connected short stories about people as they deal with rejection and shame and loneliness. I will preface my thoughts by saying that this is not for everyone, okay? But I gave it 5 stars. I can't exactly say that I enjoyed this because it's not a pleasant read. It's uncomfortable and cringy, and it makes you want to crawl out of your skin. But that's also kind of the beauty in it. It's just so gritty and real. These characters are exaggerated versions of people that you know. You might even see some parts of yourself reflected in these characters. These people that we read about are deeply flawed and incredibly unlikable. They all have these victim-like mentalities, and they're not people that you root for, but you do still feel a degree of empathy towards. There was so much wrapped up into each story. Conversations about a lack of connection in the age of social media and the internet, about performative political correctness and what that spirals into in the face of rejection. One story was almost entirely dedicated to identity politics. This book will make you think. It will make you question yourself, question your beliefs, and whether your actions match the ground that you claim to stand on. It'll call you out. It will absolutely call you out. There is one story in here that is just, it's so out there, okay? You have to tread lightly before going into this. Again, this isn't a book that I would broadly recommend. I think that in another world, in another dimension, I would have absolutely hated this. I would have found it to be obnoxiously pretentious, but for whatever reason, the Monsi in this reality found it to be so utterly fascinating and shocking and entertaining. If you're looking for something that is unlike anything that you've ever read, something that's kind of juicy, something that's gonna make you feel icky, something that's pretty short, this is less than 300 pages, then go for it. See what you think. And also let me know, because I know that some of y'all are just gonna hate this, but you might also feel the way I did. All right, last up, I read the 5th volume in the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman, which catches me up on the series just in time for the 6th and final installment to come out sometime in the next year. I'm hoping. This is a queer coming-of-age graphic novel series that centers the romance between sweet, sweet, sweet Charlie and Nick. I read the 1st volume of this series a couple of years ago, and I was so endeared to the characters and to the storylines that I immediately gobbled up volumes 2, 3, and 4. At the time, the 5th volume hadn't been released yet, so it's been a minute since I've been inside this world. And I was just so happy to be back. It's mostly adorable, but there are some serious themes woven into it here and there. I think that the author/artist does a really, really fantastic job of catching that teenager spirit. And it's the perfect read if you want something that's tender and wholesome and that you can honestly read in a single sitting. It's really not going to eat up a lot of your time, and it's so worth it. 5 stars. I can't help it. And that wraps up my reading wrap up. I am currently in the middle of A Prayer for the Crown Shy, which is the second book in the Monk and Robot duology, and I'm really enjoying this. I have to return it to the library in like 3 days, so I know that I'm gonna finish it. Also, it's only 150 pages, so you can expect that to be featured in my next reading wrap up. I do have a call to action before I let you go. Now that summer is here, I'm in the market for some summer romances. You know what I mean? I did a romance TBR last year, and I think I've read all of those books, and I don't know what else is out there really. I know there are a couple of series that people have recommended on BookTube, but I'm wondering if anyone has a recommendation for a standalone romance that has some Abby Jimenez Part of Your World series energy. If you can think of anything, I would really appreciate it. I'd also love to know what you all are reading, especially if you're planning on reading some romances. That would be really fun to know about. And in the meantime, I hope you're all doing wonderfully, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!